The scent of cedar and stale fear is something you never forget. Huddled in the dark, my knees pressed tightly against my chest, I wasn't waiting for a monster under the bed. I was hiding from the two men I loved most in this world. Through the sliver of the closet door, I watched them pour champagne, the bubbles hissing in the silence of the bridal suite. They weren't toasting to my happiness. They were toasting to my funeral. In that suffocating darkness, with the muffled sounds of the city gridlock 10 floors below, the woman I used to be died. The only question left was whether the woman who walked out of that closet would be a victim or a survivor. At 55 years old, I was about to get married for the second time and start my life over. 2 hours before the wedding, I decided to give my fiancé a romantic surprise, so I hid in the closet of the bridal suite. That was when I realized someone else was entering the room with him. When I recognized the voice, my heart hammered against my ribs. But before we go any further, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and tell me in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories travel. My name is Victoria, I am 55 years old, and I thought I had finally found the peace I had been searching for. After 15 years of widowhood, raising my son alone, and dedicating every minute of my life to the company I built from scratch, I was on the verge of saying, I do, again. Julian was everything I had ever dreamed of, kind, attentive, successful. He appeared in my life when I least expected it, at a charity gala my company sponsored at a luxury hotel on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was love at first sight, or at least, that is what I believed. We've all met someone like that, haven't we? Too good to be true, and usually they are. That Saturday morning, there were only 3 hours left until the ceremony. I was in the beauty salon they had set up, especially for me at the Plaza Hotel, where the wedding was taking place. My dress hung there, an elegant champagne model I had chosen with such care. No white, no extravagant veils. At 55, I wanted something sophisticated, discreet, something that reflected who I really was. The makeup artist worked on my face while I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman than the one I was at 30 during my first marriage. My face had laugh lines, marks of someone who has lived, suffered, and overcome. My hair, once entirely brown, now had silver strands that I insisted on keeping. I was not ashamed of my age. On the contrary, every year lived was a conquest. My son, Brandon, was downstairs welcoming the guests along with Julian. Brandon was 32 years old and had always been the center of my universe. After I lost my first husband in a car accident, I dedicated myself entirely to raising my son and managing my business. The import company I founded grew beyond my expectations. Today, we were market leaders with multi-million-dollar contracts and a solid reputation. When I introduced Julian to Brandon 6 months ago, I was relieved by my son's reaction. He hugged Julian warmly and said he just wanted to see me happy. He said I deserved to start over, that I had spent too much time alone. Those words filled me with joy. Seeing my son support my new relationship seemed like the final blessing I needed to move forward. Julian was 10 years younger than me. He was 45 and worked as a financial consultant. He knew everyone, had important contacts. He helped me expand the business, introduced me to investors, and opened doors I didn't even know existed. He was charismatic, always well-dressed, with that smile that lit up any room. My heart, which I thought had forgotten how to love romantically, beat stronger again. As the makeup artist applied the final touch of blush, an idea popped into my head. I wanted to surprise Julian. I wanted to see him when he entered the bridal suite, observe his face before revealing myself. It would be an intimate moment, special, just ours. I grabbed my phone and texted my assistant, asking for the spare key card to the suite where we would spend our first night as husband and wife. She replied quickly, saying she would leave the card at the front desk. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. At 55, I could still be spontaneous and romantic. Life hadn't ended just because I had wrinkles and gray hair. I was alive, in love, and about to start a new chapter. When my makeup was done, I gave the team a break for a few minutes, saying I needed a moment alone to collect myself. As soon as they left, I grabbed my purse and slipped out discreetly through the side door of the salon. The hotel hallway was quiet. Most of the staff were busy preparing the ballroom on the ground floor. I took the elevator to the 10th floor, where the presidential suite Julian and I would use was located. My heart was racing, not from nervousness, but from genuine joy. I felt like a teenager pulling a prank. I passed the floor reception, grabbed the keycard my assistant had left, and walked down the silent corridor to the door of Suite 1005. I tapped the card on the sensor, and the door opened with a soft click. The room was impeccable. The king-size bed, covered in pristine white sheets, red rose petals scattered artistically, cold champagne in a silver bucket. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had planned. I looked around for the ideal place to hide. My dress was too voluminous to fit under the bed. The bathroom would be too obvious. My eyes settled on the large built-in closet near the window. It was spacious, with sliding doors that left a small crack when not fully closed. I opened the closet and saw it was empty, except for some hangers and 2 white bathrobes. There was enough space to fit inside without wrinkling my dress too much. I took a deep breath and stepped in, closing the sliding door almost completely, leaving only a tiny opening through which I could see the room. The light entering through the crack was enough to see the bed and the entrance door. I could see out, but hardly anyone would see me in there. I leaned against the back wall of the closet and waited. My plan was simple. When Julian entered, I would jump out and surprise him. I imagined his smile, the shock in his eyes. It would be a special moment we would keep forever. Looking back, I wonder if some part of me already knew, if my intuition was screaming louder than my heart. The minutes passed slowly. I could hear my own heart beating in the silence of the room. The scent of roses filled the air. From where I was, I could see the reflection of the window in the vanity mirror. The sky outside was blue, cloudless. Everything conspired for this to be the perfect day. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were heavy, masculine steps. My heart sped up. Was it Julian? There were still 2 hours until the ceremony. Maybe he had come to check if everything was in order. I smiled in the darkness of the closet, preparing for the moment of surprise. I heard the sound of the card swiping. The door opened, and the footsteps entered. Through the crack, I saw a pair of men's shoes. But they weren't the Italian loafers Julian always wore. They were casual sneakers, worn out. I frowned, confused. Who could it be? Then I heard a voice that froze me completely. "I'm here. You took your time." It was my son's voice. It was Brandon. My mind panicked. What was Brandon doing there? Why was he in the bridal suite? I held my breath, trying to understand. Maybe he had come to check something for me. Maybe he wanted to make sure everything was perfect. But why that tone of voice? He sounded impatient, even irritated. The door opened again. Other steps entered. This time, I immediately recognized the shoes. They were Julian's loafers. My fiancé was there, with my son, in the room where we would spend our first night together. "Sorry I'm late," Julian said. His voice was different. It wasn't the sweet, gentle tone he always used with me. It was cold, objective. "I had to ditch your mother's gossiping cousins." My mother? Was he talking about me? Calling me your mother to Brandon? A chill ran down my spine. Something was very wrong. "How much longer are we going to have to put up with this charade?" Brandon asked, and the disdain in his voice was unmistakable. "I'm tired of pretending I'm happy with this ridiculous marriage." My legs almost gave out. I held onto the closet wall, trying to process what I was hearing. Charade? Ridiculous marriage? What was my son talking about? There is no sound in the world more shattering than the betrayal of your own child. It breaks things inside you that can never be fixed. "Calm down," Julian replied, and I could hear him pacing the room. "Just a few more hours. After the ceremony, after she signs the community property papers, the hard part will be over." My blood froze in my veins. Community property. We had agreed on separate assets. I had insisted on it. Julian had agreed, saying his love for me had nothing to do with money. The papers my lawyer prepared clearly specified separate assets. "Are you sure she'll sign without reading?" Brandon asked. His voice sounded anxious now. "My mother is smart. She always reads everything before signing." Julian laughed. It was a low, cruel laugh I had never heard before. "Your job was to create the perfect emotional environment. You did very well, by the way. That speech at the engagement party about how you just wanted to see me happy, about how she deserved love again. Brilliant. She was so moved she didn't even question when I suggested changing lawyers. My mind went back 3 weeks. Julian had suggested we use his lawyer to prepare the wedding documents, saying the man was a specialist in family law and would speed everything up. I, trusting and in love, agreed. I never imagined. And afterwards? Brandon asked. After she signs? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. Every second seemed like an eternity. Afterwards, Julian said slowly, we go on the honeymoon. That private yacht charter in the Caribbean she wanted so much. Water everywhere. Plenty of opportunities for accidents. No, this couldn't be happening. I must be having a nightmare. Maybe the wedding stress, the anxiety, all of it was making me hallucinate. But my son's voice cut through any hope that this was a figment of my imagination. An accident at sea, Brandon said, and there was a disturbing excitement in his tone. No body to investigate much. Perfect. Tears began to run down my face, silent and warm. My son, my own son, was planning my death. The boy I raised, for whom I sacrificed everything, was conspiring to kill me. I learned from the best, Julian continued, and I could hear him sitting on the bed. I've done this twice before. Works like a clock. Twice before? My stomach turned. Had he done this before? Had he killed other women? Tell me about them, Brandon asked, and the morbid curiosity in his voice made me nauseous. Julian sighed, as if recalling pleasant memories. The first was Margaret, a widow, 52 years old, owned a chain of pharmacies in Chicago. We got married after 8 months of dating, honeymoon in Maui. She drowned while diving. The instructor said she probably panicked when she saw a manta ray. Very tragic. He paused, and I could hear him rummaging through something. I inherited everything. Her family even offered for me to keep managing the businesses. I stayed 6 months, enough time to sell everything quietly. I walked away with almost $10 million. 10 million. He was talking about human lives as if they were business transactions. And the second? Brandon insisted. Ah, Beatrice, Julian replied with a fake nostalgic sigh. Construction magnate in Houston, 58 years old, widow too. She was a bit harder, very controlling, very involved in the business. Took me a year to earn her trust completely. How did you do it? Trip to Lake Tahoe, hiking trail, just the two of us. She slipped on the rocks during a morning hike, hit her head and fell into the water. They found the body 3 days later. Investigation concluded it was an accident. I was devastated, cried at the funeral. The whole performance. Her family embraced me, consoled me. I inherited a 40% stake in the company, sold everything in less than a year. I was shaking uncontrollably inside the closet. That man, that monster I had let into my life, into my bed, into my business, was a serial killer, and my son knew. Worse, my son was helping. And my mother is going to be the third, Brandon said, and there was no emotion in his voice. It was as if he were talking about the weather. The best of all, Julian confirmed. Her import empire is worth much more than the other two combined. We're talking at least $50 million in liquid assets, not counting properties and investments. With you as the sole heir, and me as the widower entitled to half of everything through community property, we're going to split a fortune. $50 million. It was about that. I had built everything from scratch, worked 16 hours a day for years, and now I discovered that my own son saw all that effort only as money waiting to be stolen. When are you going to transfer my share? Brandon asked. Patience, Julian replied. First, we let the appropriate mourning period pass, 6 months, maybe a year. Then, I start selling the assets discreetly. You'll receive your half as agreed. $25 million. Enough money so you never have to work a day in your life again. I deserve it, Brandon said bitterly. I spent my whole life being the perfect son. Studied what she wanted, worked in the company like a slave, pretended to care about that boring import business, all to ensure that when she died, I would inherit everything. Every word was a stab in my heart. I had given everything for that boy, paid for the best schools, the best university, gave him an important position in the company even when he showed little interest. I thought he just needed time to mature, that eventually he would fall in love with the business like I did. "You did the hardest part," Julian said, introducing me to her, building the trust, making her see me as the perfect stepfather. "Your work was essential." The perfect stepfather. The pieces started to fit in my mind. It had been Brandon who suggested I go to that charity gala where I met Julian. Brandon, who insisted Julian was a good man, that I should give love a chance. Brandon, who helped plan our first date, who was always there encouraging the relationship. It had all been a plan, from the beginning. "Are you sure there's no way they can trace this back to us?" Brandon asked, sounding worried for the first time. "None," Julian guaranteed. "I'm careful. I never use the same method twice. I never leave evidence. The 2 times before there wasn't even a deep investigation. Older women, accidents during trips. It's a common pattern. Authorities don't even suspect." "What if someone gets suspicious?" "Of what?" Julian laughed. "Of a loving husband who tragically lost his wife in an accident, of a dedicated son who is grieving his mother. We are victims, Brandon, and victims aren't suspects." They continued talking about details, about how Julian would ensure I wore a defective life jacket during a boat ride, about how he had already bribed one of the yacht crew members to testify that I was drinking heavily, acting recklessly, about how Brandon would stage the devastated son, maybe even faint at the funeral to cause more commotion. I listened to everything inside that dark closet, my wedding dress wrinkled, my makeup running with tears. The woman who entered that room half an hour ago no longer existed. That Victoria, naive and in love, had died. In her place, another person was born, someone who had just lost everything she loved, but who would not lose her life. It's funny how the brain works in trauma. I stopped crying. I stopped feeling. I just became cold. "We need to go down," Julian said finally. "The ceremony starts in an hour. Your mother must be wondering where you are." "Let her worry," Brandon replied with disdain. "In a few months, she won't worry about anything anymore." They laughed. They laughed at my planned death. They laughed at how foolish and trusting I was. They laughed at how easy it would be to fool me until the end. I heard footsteps walking away. The door opened and closed. Then, silence. I stood there, unable to move. My whole body was trembling. My legs felt weak, as if they would collapse at any moment. How long did I spend there? I can't say. It could have been 5 minutes or 30. Finally, with immense effort, I pushed the closet door and stepped out. I stumbled to the bed and sat down, or rather, collapsed onto it. The rose petals stuck to my dress. The champagne was still cold in the bucket, indifferent to the tragedy that had just occurred in that room. I looked at the vanity mirror and saw my reflection. My eyes were red, the mascara running, forming black lines on my face. I looked like a ghost bride, a distorted version of that happy woman who was in the beauty salon an hour ago. My phone vibrated in the dress pocket. It was a text from Brandon. "Mom, where are you? We're looking for you," followed by another from Julian. "My love, I can't wait to see you at the altar. I love you. I love you." Those words that once filled me with joy now caused me physical revulsion. I had to get out of there. I had to think. But do what? If I simply canceled the wedding, they would know I found out something. Julian could disappear, and I would have no proof of what I heard. He had done it before, twice, and got away with it. He was experienced, careful. And Brandon, my son. How would I prove my own son was trying to kill me? Who would believe me? I was having trouble believing it myself. I grabbed my phone and, with trembling hands, opened the voice recording app. I looked at the time. 42 minutes. Everything had been recorded. Every word, every detail of the murderous plan. It was there, in that small audio file. But would it be enough? Would it be admissible in court? And even if it was, what would happen? My son would go to prison. The boy I carried in my arms, who I taught to walk, who I comforted in every nightmare. Even after everything I heard, the part of me that was a mother felt a stabbing pain just thinking about it. I got up from the bed with difficulty. I needed to act, and I needed to act fast. I went to the suite's bathroom and looked at my reflection again, this time under the harsh light of the mirrors. I took a towel and carefully wiped the running mascara. I fixed my makeup as best I could with the products I had in my purse. My mind was working at maximum speed. I had 40 minutes. 40 minutes to decide whether to destroy my own life by exposing my son or simply run away and leave everything behind. 40 minutes to choose between justice and motherhood. But then I remembered the other women, Margaret and Beatrice. Did they have families, children who cried for them, elderly parents who were deprived of saying goodbye to their daughters? And how many other women would be the next victims if I did nothing? Julian had turned this into a business. He was meticulous, patient, efficient, and now he had a partner in Brandon, someone who could continue the work, perfect the method, find new victims. No, I couldn't let this happen. But I also couldn't just go to the police right then. It was my word against theirs. And I knew how convincing Julian was. Hadn't he been the one who won me over completely in 6 months? Who won the trust of my family, my friends, my business partners? I needed a plan, and I needed to execute it now. I grabbed my phone and texted my personal lawyer, Audrey, a woman I had trusted for years. Absolute emergency. I need you at the hotel now. Suite 1005. Don't tell anyone. It's a matter of life or death. She replied in seconds. On my way. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Then I sent another message, this time to Mason, my head of personal security, an ex-cop who had worked with me for a decade. I need you in the presidential suite. Urgent. Come alone and discreetly. While I waited, I went to the laptop on the room's desk. It was my personal laptop I had asked to be left there to do some work during the honeymoon. I connected my phone and transferred the audio file to the computer, making 3 backups on different cloud services. Then I created a new document and started typing. I wrote down everything I had heard, every detail, every word, the names of the previous victims, Margaret and Beatrice, the methods used, the amounts mentioned. I wrote it in affidavit format, dated and digitally signed. 15 minutes later, there was a discreet knock at the door. It was Audrey. She entered quickly, closing the door behind her. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Victoria, what happened? Are you okay?" I signaled for her to sit and put headphones on her. "Listen to this, all of it." I played the audio. I saw her expression change as she listened. From confusion to shock, from shock to horror, from horror to contained fury. When it finished, she was pale. "My God," she whispered. "Your son and Julian. Victoria, we need to call the police now." "Not yet," I replied. My voice was surprisingly calm. "I need you to do something first. I need documents, quickly." I explained my plan. Audrey looked at me like I was crazy, but then nodded slowly. "It's risky, extremely risky. I know, but it's the only way to ensure they don't escape. Julian did this before, twice. He's careful. If we simply cancel the wedding now, he'll vanish. And Brandon, he'll invent a story, say I'm confused, maybe even question my sanity." Another knock on the door. It was Mason. I opened it and he entered, his military posture evident even in civilian clothes. When he heard the audio, his jaw tightened. "I can handle this other ways," he said quietly, and the tone in his voice made it clear what kind of resolution he had in mind. "No," I replied firmly. "This has to be done the right way, legal. They are going to pay for what they did, but within the law." I explained my plan to both of them. They tried to dissuade me. They argued it was too dangerous, that I was putting my life at risk. But I was determined. "Victoria," Audrey said, taking my hands, "are you sure about this? Once we start, there is no turning back." I looked at her, then at Mason. "My son planned to kill me. The man I loved is a serial killer. There is nothing to go back to here. There is only justice or death. And I am not going to die." They exchanged a look and then nodded. Audrey started working on her laptop, preparing the documents I asked for. Mason made some discreet calls, organizing what would be necessary. I went back to the bathroom and completely recomposed my appearance. 30 minutes later, I looked like a radiant bride again. On the outside, at least. Inside, I was another person, a colder, harder, more determined person. I looked at Audrey. "Ready?" She nodded, showing me the documents on her tablet. "All set. But Victoria, last chance to change your mind." "I'm not changing it," I replied. I digitally signed every document she prepared. I grabbed my phone and texted Brandon. "Sorry for the delay, sweetie. Was finishing up some details. I'm coming down now." To Julian, "My love, see you at the altar in 10 minutes. I can't wait." Mason escorted me discreetly to the service elevator. Audrey went a different way, carrying her laptop and a copy of everything. I had instructed her exactly what to do and when to do it. When I arrived at the ballroom where the ceremony would be, the music was already playing. My guests were all seated, beautifully dressed, smiling with expectation. Brandon was standing next to Julian near the improvised altar. My son saw me and smiled. It was a warm, perfect smile. He was good at it, always was. How many times over the years had I misread his expressions? How many times did I mistake his manipulations for genuine love? Julian turned around when the bridal march began. His eyes lit up when he saw me. He brought his hand to his chest in a gesture that seemed moved, the perfect performance of the love-struck groom. I walked down the aisle, alone. I had no father to give me away. He had passed years ago. I always thought Brandon would walk me down the aisle. But he had politely declined, saying he preferred to stand by Julian as best man. Now I understood why. They wanted to be together, present a united front. With every step I took, I felt the guests' eyes on me. 200 people who had no idea what was about to happen, 200 witnesses to what I was planning. I reached the altar. Julian extended his hand to me. I took it. His hand was warm, firm, the hand of a killer. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "Thank you," I replied with a smile. The officiant, a justice of the peace Julian had suggested, began the ceremony. He spoke about love, commitment, partnership. Every word sounded like a cruel joke. I looked at Brandon next to Julian. My son was watching me with an expression I now recognized. It wasn't love. It was calculation. He was assessing if I suspected anything, if there was any sign that I knew. I smiled at him, a proud mother's smile. I saw relief pass through his eyes. "We now come to the exchange of vows," the officiant announced. "Julian, do you take Victoria as your lawful wife?" "I do," Julian said, his voice clear and firm. "Victoria, do you take Julian as your lawful husband?" This was the moment that would change everything. I looked at Julian, then at Brandon, then at all the expectant faces around me. "I have something to say first." I spoke loud and clear. A murmur ran through the audience. Julian frowned slightly, confused, but still maintaining the smile. "Victoria," he said quietly, "is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," I replied. Then I turned to the guests. "You all came here today thinking you would attend a wedding. You were going to attend, but not the wedding you imagined." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear people breathing. Julian tried to hold my hand, but I pulled away. "Victoria, you're nervous," he said, trying to look concerned. "Let's take a break. You can—" "I'm not nervous," I cut him off. "I am perfectly lucid, perhaps more lucid than I have been in the last 6 months." Brandon stepped forward. "Mom, what is going on? Are you feeling sick?" "Don't call me Mom," I said, and my voice came out colder than I intended. I saw him recoil as if he had been slapped. I turned back to the guests. "Today, about an hour ago, I was in the bridal suite, hiding in the closet. I wanted to give my future husband a romantic surprise." Julian went pale. He understood immediately where this was going. But the person who entered the room wasn't just Julian. It was my son, too. And they didn't know I was there, so they spoke freely. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about," Brandon started, but there was panic in his eyes. "And I heard everything," I continued, my voice rising. "I heard you two planning my murder. I heard you laughing about how easy it would be to fool me. I heard about the other 2 women Julian killed before." The room erupted in gasps of shock. People stood up. They started talking at the same time. Julian tried to grab me, but Mason appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us. "This is madness," Julian shouted to the guests. "She's having a breakdown. She needs help." "I'm having a breakdown?" I repeated. How interesting. That's the same tactic you would use if I had survived the accident you were planning. Isn't that right? Questioning my sanity? I grabbed my phone from the bouquet of flowers one of the bridesmaids was holding. I connected it to the room's sound system. You are all going to hear exactly what I heard. I hit play. Brandon's voice filled the room. I'm here. You took your time. Followed by Julian's. Sorry I'm late. I had to ditch your mother's gossiping cousins. I saw Julian's face change color, from pale to red, from red to gray. Brandon tried to run, but Mason grabbed him by the arm. The audio continued playing. Every word, every detail of the plan. The guests listened in absolute shock. Some women started crying. Men clenched their fists. When the audio mentioned the previous victims, Margaret and Beatrice, I saw two women in the audience stand up abruptly. I didn't know them. They must have been guests of Julian's side, relatives he kept close to maintain his facade. Margaret was my sister, one of them shouted, tears running down her face. She died 3 years ago. They said it was an accident. The other woman was shaking. Beatrice was my business partner. She married a man named Robert Andrews. But that man, she pointed at my fiancé, looks exactly like him, just with a beard and different hair. Julian tried to leave, but Mason and 3 other guards I had instructed discreetly before were already blocking the exits. You don't understand, Julian yelled. That recording is fake. It was manipulated. Victoria is obsessed. She... Obsessed? I laughed without humor. They call it gaslighting these days. Standing there, watching him try to make me feel crazy, it was almost impressive in a sick way. You're right about one thing. I was obsessed. Obsessed with believing I had found love again. Obsessed with trusting my own son. I looked at Brandon. He had collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, wanted to run to him, hug him, ask why. But the part that had heard him laugh about my planned death stood firm. Brandon, I spoke loudly. Look at me. He lifted his face. There were tears there, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or just another manipulation. Why? I asked. You are my son. I gave you everything. Why? He stayed silent for a long moment. Then something changed in his expression. The mask dropped completely. What remained was something cold, resentful. Because I'm tired, he said. Tired of being the perfect son. Tired of working in that boring business. Tired of waiting for you to die naturally to finally have what is rightfully mine. Every word was a dagger. Rightfully? You think you have the right to kill me? You were going to leave it all to me anyway, he replied with a shrug. I'm just speeding up the process, and without having to pretend I care anymore. The people around us gasped. My best friend, sitting in the front row, began to sob loudly. At that moment, the doors of the ballroom burst open. Police officers entered, led by a district attorney that Audrey had contacted. She had taken copies of the recording directly to the police station while I stalled the ceremony. Julian Montgomery, also known as Julian Silva and Julian Mendez, the DA announced. You are under arrest for suspicion of 2 counts of homicide and conspiracy to commit murder. 2 officers handcuffed him. Julian tried to resist, shouting that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was crazy, that he was innocent, but the cuffs were already on his wrists. Brandon Gutierrez, the DA continued, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. When the police approached Brandon, something inside me broke. My son, my baby. I remembered when he was born, that tiny being I brought into the world. The first day of school, the nights I spent by his bed when he was sick. He looked at me as he was being handcuffed. Are you really going to do this? Your own family? You stopped being my family when you planned to kill me, I replied, but my voice cracked at the end. They were taken away. Julian still shouting his innocence, Brandon in silence, staring at the floor. The guests were in absolute shock. Some tried to comfort me, but I raised my hand, asking for space. Audrey approached. There are reporters outside. The news has already leaked. You need to prepare yourself. I nodded. Let them in. I'm going to give a statement. Victoria, are you sure? You don't have to do this right now. I just found out my son and my fiancé wanted to kill me. I completed. Yes, I am aware, and yes, I am going to talk. I walked out of the ballroom. The camera flashes were blinding. Microphones were shoved toward me. Questions shouted from all sides. I raised my hand, and the commotion died down. My name is Victoria Gutierrez, I began. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I discovered that the two people I trusted most planned to murder me for money. I paused, letting that sink in. But I am not going to be a victim. I am not going to be just another name on a list of women who were manipulated and killed. I am going to use every resource I have, every contact, every penny, to ensure justice is done. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Gutierrez, how do you feel about your son?" I took a deep breath. I am shattered. As a mother, I am completely shattered. But as a woman, as a human being, I am furious. And the fury is going to outweigh the pain, at least long enough to do what needs to be done. Another reporter, "Are you going to sue?" "I am going to do more than sue," I interrupted. "I am going to ensure that every victim of Julian is recognized. Margaret and Beatrice will not be forgotten as simple accidents. And I am going to use my story as a warning. Women, especially older women, are seen as easy targets. Well, I am not easy, and I won't let others be treated like this." The days that followed were a whirlwind. The story spread like wildfire through the national media. 55-year-old bride exposes murder plot at altar was in all the headlines. TV shows sought me out. True crime podcasts wanted interviews. Journalists camped on the doorstep of my townhouse. I gave a few carefully selected interviews. Every time I told the story, it became easier. Not the pain, but the narrative. I was transforming my trauma into something useful, into a message. The police investigation advanced quickly. With the recording I provided and the testimony of Margaret's and Beatrice's families, they got a full search warrant for Julian's house. What they found there was terrifying. There was a computer with detailed files on not 2, but 5 women. Margaret and Beatrice were the ones he had mentioned, but there were 3 others in different cities, all dead in accidents over the last 10 years. Each one left Julian as the beneficiary of hefty life insurance policies or heir to properties. There was also a folder on me. It contained everything: my schedule, my usual routes, details about my health, my medications, my preferences. He had studied every aspect of my life with the meticulousness of a predator studying his prey. And most disturbing, there were notes on other women, potential future victims. All successful widows, all in the 50 to 60 age range, all with significant wealth. The district attorney's office called me. They had enough evidence to charge Julian with 5 murders, not just 2. With my recording and the testimony I would give, they had a solid case. But there was a problem. "Brandon, technically," explained the prosecutor, a rigorous woman named D.A. Reynolds, "your son can claim he was coerced, that he was afraid of Julian, that he was only cooperating to save his own life." "But the recording," I protested. "He was clearly participating voluntarily. He was excited about it." "I know, and we are going to use that. But a good defense attorney can create reasonable doubt. He is young. He can say he was manipulated by an older, experienced man." The idea that Brandon might escape full punishment infuriated me. "What do you need from me?" "Your testimony will be crucial, but also, Victoria, I need you to be prepared. The defense is going to try to destroy you on the witness stand. They are going to question your mental stability, your motivations. They are going to suggest you manipulated the recording, that you are taking revenge on a son who disappointed you." "Let them try," I replied. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, the media remained frenzied. They discovered the identities of Julian's other 3 victims. Families who had mourned loved ones lost in tragic accidents now discovered they were planned murders. One of those families contacted me. The daughter of one of the victims, a woman named Patricia, came to my office. "My mother," she said with tears in her eyes, "died in a fire 7 years ago in her vacation home. They said it was faulty wiring, but I always knew there was something off. She was so careful, so meticulous." I held her hand. "I am so sorry. For you and for her." "Thanks to you," Patricia said. "Finally, we are going to have answers. Finally, we can process the grief for real, knowing the truth." That conversation changed something in me. I wasn't doing this just for myself. I was doing it for Margaret, Beatrice, for Patricia's mother, and for the other women Julian had turned into statistics. Meanwhile, Brandon was in jail awaiting trial. His lawyer tried to negotiate. They wanted him to testify against Julian in exchange for a reduced sentence. D.A. Reynolds called me to discuss it. It's a good offer. With his testimony, we guarantee Julian never gets out of prison. And Brandon? He would probably get between 5 to 10 years, with the possibility of parole. 5 to 10 years. For conspiring to kill me. For laughing about my planned death. No, I said. He doesn't get a deal. He goes to trial just like Julian. Victoria, I understand your anger, but it's not about anger, I interrupted. It's about justice. If we let him make a deal, we send the message that conspiring to kill your own mother for money is something that can be negotiated. It isn't. The prosecutor was silent for a moment. Are you sure? The trial is going to be brutal. For you. I know, but I will be there, and I will testify. Brandon tried to contact me several times. Letters, messages through his lawyer, requests for visits. I ignored them all. I had nothing to say to him. Or rather, everything I had to say would be said in court. His paternal grandmother, my ex-mother-in-law, came to see me. She was devastated. Victoria, she cried, he is my grandson, my only grandson. Please, can't you? He's just a boy. He was influenced. He planned to kill me, I said gently but firmly. He laughed about it. If you heard the recording— I heard it, she admitted, wiping her tears. The police played it for me, but he's a child. He is 32 years old. He is not a child. And no one influenced him to wish for my death. That came from him. She left crying. I felt sorry for her. She was innocent in all this, just a grandmother who loved her grandson, but I couldn't let that change my decision. The months passed slowly. I threw myself into work, using the company as a distraction. Ironically, business had never been better. The publicity, although tragic, had put my name in the spotlight. New contracts appeared, investors approached. I used part of the profits to create a foundation. Justice for Her, dedicated to helping families of women who died in suspicious circumstances get proper investigations. I hired private investigators, lawyers, offered resources to those who couldn't pay. Margaret, Beatrice, and Julian's other 3 victims became the first posthumous beneficiaries. Their stories were told, their deaths reinvestigated properly, their memories honored. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed. Media from all over the country were there. The families of the victims sat together in solidarity, my friends and employees supporting me. And there at the front, separated by guards, were Julian and Brandon. Julian looked different, smaller somehow. The confidence he always exuded had vanished. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale. Brandon looked at me when I entered. He tried to smile, that smile he always used when he wanted something from me. I looked away. The judge entered, and the trial began. D.A. Reynolds presented the case methodically. The recording was played for the jury. I saw their expressions change from neutral to shocked, from shocked to disgusted. Then they called the first witness, me. I stood up and walked to the witness stand. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The courtroom is a theater, folks, and the best liars usually have the best scripts. But facts don't need a script. And the prosecutor started with basic questions: name, age, profession, how I met Julian, how long we dated. I answered everything calmly, clearly. Then we got to the day of the almost wedding. Can you tell us in your own words what happened that day? I took a deep breath. I was happy. I was about to marry a man I loved, or at least thought I loved. I decided to give him a romantic surprise. I wanted to hide in the bridal suite and surprise him when he entered. And what happened while you were hiding? I heard footsteps. I thought it was Julian, but I recognized the voice of my son, Brandon. I found it strange. I didn't understand what he would be doing there. Then Julian entered too. And did they know you were there? No, I was hiding in the closet. They thought they were alone. What did they talk about? I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words return. Brandon asked how much longer they would have to put up with the charade. Julian said just a few more hours, until I signed the wedding papers. What papers? I discovered later that Julian had switched the separate property documents I had agreed to for community property documents. He planned for me to sign without reading during the ceremony, while I was emotional. The prosecutor nodded. And then? Then they started talking about killing me. My voice wavered a little. About an accident during the honeymoon. Julian mentioned he had done it before with other women, Margaret and Beatrice. How did you feel hearing that? Like my world was crumbling, I admitted. The man I loved was planning to kill me. And worse, much worse, was that my son was helping. My own son, who I raised, who I loved, was actively participating in the plan. Tears began to flow, but I didn't wipe them. I let the jury see my pain. And what did Brandon say during that conversation? He said he was tired of pretending to be the perfect son, that he wanted the money that would be his anyway. He asked when he would receive his share of the $50 million. I heard murmurs in the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel, asking for silence. $50 million refers to my estate, the approximate value of everything I built during my life. They were dividing my money before even killing me. The prosecutor had me repeat specific parts of the conversation. Every word I spoke was confirmed by the recording they had as evidence. Then it was time for the defense to cross-examine me. Julian's lawyer stood up. He was a middle-aged man, expensive suit, condescending expression. "Mrs. Gutierrez," he began, "doesn't it seem a little too convenient that you recorded that entire conversation?" "I didn't plan to record," I replied. My phone was in my dress pocket with the recording app open because I had used it to record some messages for Julian earlier. It continued recording without me realizing. "Ah, what luck," he said sarcastically. "And you, an experienced businesswoman, want us to believe you didn't notice it was recording?" "I was hiding in a closet listening to my son and my fiancé plan to kill me," I replied firmly. "I wasn't exactly worried about my cell phone." "Or maybe," he suggested, "you were staging all this. Maybe you were angry because your son didn't approve of this marriage. Maybe you wanted revenge." "My son appeared to completely approve of the marriage," I replied. "And why would I invent that my own son wants to kill me?" "Money," he said simply. "With your son in prison, you maintain total control over your estate. No one to share with, no one to question your decisions." I laughed. It was a short, bitter laugh. My son would have inherited everything when I died naturally. He didn't need to kill me for that. I gained nothing from this situation except the loss of the son I loved. The lawyer tried a few other approaches, suggesting I was mentally unstable, that the recording could have been edited. But the prosecutor objected every time, and the judge sustained. The recording was too clear, had been verified by experts as authentic. Then it was Brandon's lawyer's turn. He was younger, seemed less cynical. His approach was different. "Mrs. Gutierrez," he said gently, "do you love your son?" The question caught me off guard. I did. "Did love? You don't love him anymore?" "I don't know what I feel," I admitted. "He is my son. He always will be. But he planned to kill me. How do I reconcile those two things?" "Exactly," said the lawyer. "For a son to plan to kill his own mother, wouldn't some kind of coercion, manipulation be necessary?" "Objection," said the prosecutor. "Speculation." "I'll rephrase," said the lawyer. "Mrs. Gutierrez, in the recording, who initiated the conversation about murder? Who brought up the subject first?" I thought back. "Julian." "And Julian is how many years older than Brandon?" 13 years. More experienced, more manipulative. You yourself were fooled by him. Were you not?" "I was," I admitted reluctantly. "So, isn't it possible that Brandon, a 32-year-old young man, was also manipulated? That Julian planted those ideas in his head?" "No," I replied firmly, "because in the recording, Brandon doesn't sound coerced. He sounds excited. He laughed. He asked when he would receive the money. Those are not the actions of someone being forced." "But he is your son," insisted the lawyer. "Surely there must be—" He stopped being my son when he agreed to my murder, I said, and my voice resonated through the courtroom. I would have given him everything, literally everything. He just needed to wait. But no. He wanted it now, and he was willing to kill me to get it. I saw Brandon lower his head. The interrogation continued for hours. They made me repeat the story several times, looking for inconsistencies. They didn't find them because there weren't any. I was telling the truth. When I was finally released from the stand, I was exhausted. But there were more witnesses. The families of Margaret and Beatrice testified about the suspicious circumstances of the deaths. Experts spoke about the methods used, about how the accidents were carefully planned. And then the prosecution brought their surprise witness. It was a woman I had never seen. She was about 50 years old, pretty, well-dressed. When she was called to the stand, Julian went white. "Please state your name for the court," asked the prosecutor. "My name is Danielle Clark," said the woman, "and I was supposed to be Julian's next victim." The courtroom exploded. The judge had to bang the gavel several times to restore order. Danielle told her story. How she met Julian at a golf club 6 months before he met me. How he was charming, attentive, perfect. How he proposed, and she accepted. "But then," she said, "I found some documents in his house about other women, and I started to get suspicious. I hired a private investigator. He discovered Julian had several names, several identities. When I confronted Julian, he disappeared, simply vanished. I never saw him again until I saw his picture in the newspapers, arrested for the murder of several women." Danielle's testimony was devastating for the defense. She had documents, emails, everything proving Julian had tried the same scheme with her. She had escaped only by being suspicious enough to investigate. The defense tried to discredit her, suggesting she was looking for her 15 minutes of fame, but she had evidence that was too solid. Then it was Julian and Brandon's turn to testify. Julian took the stand first. He tried to look calm, serene, but you could see the sweat on his forehead. His lawyer guided him through a carefully constructed narrative. Julian claimed everything was a misunderstanding, that the conversation I heard was taken out of context, that he and Brandon were just joking about absurd scenarios, not actually planning anything. "Joking?" repeated the prosecutor when it was her turn to cross-examine. "You were joking about killing Victoria Gutierrez?" "It was a type of dark humor," said Julian. "We, Brandon and I, developed that kind of friendship. We made jokes about everything." "Jokes?" repeated the prosecutor. "And the other women? Margaret, Beatrice, the other 3? Were they jokes too?" "I didn't kill anyone," said Julian firmly. "Those were all real tragedies, real accidents. You are trying to turn me into some kind of serial killer when I am just a man with bad luck who lost people he loved." "Bad luck," murmured the prosecutor. "Mr. Montgomery, or should I call you Silva, or Mendez? How many fake names have you used?" "I changed my name legally a few times," he admitted, "for personal reasons." "Personal reasons like fleeing investigations?" "Objection." "Sustained. Rephrase, counselor." She changed tactics. "Sir, in the recording you mentioned specific amounts. 50 million. You mentioned dividing Victoria's estate. How do you explain that if it was just a joke?" We were speculating about hypothetically if something happened to Victoria." "Convenient. And do you always speculate about the death of your fiancés?" The questions continued, incisive, relentless. Julian tried to maintain his story, but the prosecutor dismantled him piece by piece. Every answer of his created more contradictions. Finally, he left the stand looking defeated. Then it was Brandon's turn. My son took the stand slowly. He looked much younger than his 32 years, almost fragile. I knew it was his lawyer's strategy, but I still felt something tighten in my chest. His lawyer guided him gently. Brandon claimed he was manipulated by Julian, that he was afraid, that Julian threatened him. He said that if he didn't cooperate, he himself would be killed. "But in the recording," said the prosecutor when her turn came, "you don't sound afraid. You sound excited." "I was trying to seem cooperative," said Brandon, "so Julian wouldn't suspect I might report him." "So you planned to report him?" "Yes, eventually." "But you didn't. You didn't even warn your mother about the danger." "I was afraid," repeated Brandon. Julian is dangerous, but not dangerous enough to stop you from asking when you would receive your $25 million, right? Brandon blinked. I was just playing along. The prosecutor pulled out a document. Mr. Gutierrez, you opened an offshore account 3 weeks before the planned wedding. What for? He hesitated. Investments. Investments? Wouldn't it be to receive the money you expected to gain from your mother's death? No, I never... Never what? Never planned to receive the money? But you yourself said in the recording that you deserved that money, that you had spent your life being the perfect son. Brandon looked at me, his eyes pleading. I didn't look away, but I didn't show any emotion either. Do you love your mother? Asked the prosecutor suddenly. The question took him by surprise. Yes, I do. Curious way of showing love, planning murder. I didn't plan anything, it was all Julian. But you agreed. You laughed. You asked about your share of the money. Why were you afraid? Fear, repeated the prosecutor. Mr. Gutierrez, how many times could you have reported Julian? How many opportunities did you have to warn your mother? Silence. Did you have the police's phone number? Did you have access to your mother at any time? You could have sent an anonymous message, a call, anything. But you didn't. Do you know why? Because you wanted the money. Simple as that. You saw your mother as an obstacle between you and the wealth you believed you deserved. That's not true. Then look at your mother now, ordered the prosecutor. Look her in the eye and say you didn't want her to die. Brandon looked at me. I stared back, my face a neutral mask. He began, but nothing else came out. Tears began to run down his face. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. You are sorry for what? Asked the prosecutor. For having planned to kill your mother or for having been caught? He didn't answer, just continued crying. When he was finally dismissed, he passed by me, stumbling. He tried to touch me, but a guard stopped him. Closing arguments began the next day. The defense argued Julian was an innocent man, persecuted by circumstance, that the previous deaths were truly accidents, that the recording was being misinterpreted. For Brandon, they argued he was a victim of manipulation, a scared young man coerced by an older, dangerous man. The prosecution painted a different picture, of a calculating and experienced predator who turned murder into a lucrative business, and of a greedy son willing to kill his own mother for money. Victoria Gutierrez, said the prosecutor in her closing argument, is a survivor. She could have died at sea, another tragic victim of an accident. But by pure luck, by deciding to make a romantic surprise, she heard the truth, and she was brave enough not only to save her own life, but to bring justice for Margaret, Beatrice, and all the others. She pointed at Julian and Brandon. These men viewed successful women not as people, but as sources of income, as targets. They planned meticulously, executed coldly, and would have continued if Victoria hadn't exposed them. The jury went out to deliberate. It was 3 days of waiting, 3 days where I could barely eat or sleep. I spent nights reliving every moment, every word of the recording, every look from Brandon during the trial. Finally, the verdict came. The courtroom was packed again. I sat in the front row, Audrey on one side, Mason on the other. In the case of the state versus Julian Montgomery, began the jury foreman. For the crime of first-degree murder of Margaret Santos, we find the defendant guilty. I heard gasps behind me, Margaret's sister crying. The foreman continued. Guilty of first-degree murder of Beatrice Lima. Guilty of 3 other counts of homicide. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder against Victoria Gutierrez. Julian remained motionless as each verdict was read. In the case of the state versus Brandon Gutierrez, continued the foreman, for the crime of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. I felt something break inside me. Even expecting it, even wanting justice, hearing my son be declared guilty was like taking a bullet to the chest. You expect closure to feel like a victory parade. It doesn't. It feels like silence after a long, terrible storm. Brandon collapsed onto the table, sobbing. His lawyer tried to comfort him, but there was no comfort for that. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Julian received 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He would die in prison. When the sentence was read, he didn't even react. just stared straight ahead as if he were already dead. Brandon received 25 years with the possibility of parole after 15. The judge was harsh in his words. "Mr. Gutierrez," he said, "you betrayed the most sacred trust that exists, the trust between mother and child. You not only planned to take the life of the woman who gave you life, but you did it for pure greed. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the magnitude of what you tried to do." When it was over, when the guards took them away, Brandon looked at me one last time. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "can you forgive me someday?" I looked at him, at that man who was once my baby. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Ask me in 15 years." That was the last time I spoke to him. The following months were of rebuilding. The media eventually moved on, finding new stories. The foundation I created continued to grow, helping more and more families. The families of Margaret, Beatrice, and the other victims became part of my life. We met periodically, sharing memories of those we lost, ensuring they were never forgotten. I sold the company. I couldn't work there anymore, not when every corner reminded me of Brandon, of how I thought we were building something together. I sold it for a fair price and used the money to expand the foundation. I moved houses, too. I couldn't live in the place where I raised my son, where every room held memories of him. I bought a smaller, simpler house in Greenwich, Connecticut. I started over. Therapy helped. It was months of painful sessions, unpacking every layer of betrayal, pain, guilt. Yes, guilt. Because as much as I knew rationally it wasn't my fault, part of me kept asking, where did I go wrong? When did my son turn into someone capable of planning my murder? "You didn't go wrong," my therapist repeated. "Some people just make bad choices, cruel choices, and that is not a reflection of you as a mother." But it took time to accept that. A year after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Brandon. I stared at the envelope for days before having the courage to open it. When I finally opened it, I found pages and pages of his handwriting. That same handwriting I saw in Mother's Day cards, in affectionate notes, in childhood drawings. He apologized, said he understood if I never forgave him, that he was in therapy in prison, trying to understand why he did what he did, that greed, resentment, envy had poisoned his heart little by little, year after year. "I saw you working so hard," he wrote, "building that empire, and I started to feel like it was mine by right, like you owed me that. I forgot that you owed me nothing, that everything you did was out of love, not obligation." He spoke about Julian, about how he was seduced by the idea of quick wealth, how Julian fed his resentment, validated his greed, turned it into a concrete plan. "But I can't blame just him," he wrote. "It was me who chose to listen. It was me who agreed. It was me who laughed about your death, and I'm going to carry that for the rest of my life." He ended by saying he didn't expect a reply, didn't expect forgiveness, just wanted me to know he was trying to be a better person. I put the letter away. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready yet. 2 years passed, then 3. I did therapy, traveled, met new people. I learned to trust again, slowly. I made new friends, cultivated new hobbies. I discovered who Victoria was without being Brandon's mother, without being the CEO of a company. And I learned something important. I was strong, stronger than I ever imagined. I had survived the ultimate betrayal. I had stayed hidden in a closet, listening to my son plan my murder, and I not only survived, but I fought. I had exposed 2 criminals, brought justice for forgotten victims, transformed my tragedy into something that helped other people. At 58 years old, I was no longer that naive woman who hid in the closet hoping to surprise her fiancé. I was someone who knew the darkest side of humanity and chose not to become cynical. Someone who was betrayed by her own family and chose to continue loving, just with more care. On my 59th birthday, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I went to visit Brandon. He had changed. He was thinner, older than his 35 years should look. But there was something different in his eyes, something that could be genuine remorse. We sat separated by the glass, phones to our ears. "Hi, Mom," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "Hi, Brandon," I replied. We stayed silent for a long moment. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. I didn't expect it. Neither did I admitted. I don't know why I came. Maybe to see if you really changed, or maybe to see if I changed enough to sit here without hating you. And did you change? I thought about it. I don't hate you, not anymore, but I also don't know if I can love you like before. That Brandon, the son I loved, died in that hotel room. You are another person now, and so am I. Tears ran down his face. I know, and I don't expect you to love me. I just hope that one day, maybe, you can see me as a human being who made a terrible mistake and is trying to be better. Killing your mother isn't a mistake, Brandon. It's a choice. You're right. It was a choice. The worst one I ever made. We talked for 40 minutes. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just two strangers who were once mother and son trying to find some kind of peace. When I got up to leave, he asked, "Are you coming back?" I don't know, I replied honestly. Maybe. Someday. But don't wait. Don't put your redemption in my hands. That is your journey. I left the prison and drove home as the sun set. And I realized something. I was at peace. Not a complete peace, not a peace without scars, but peace nonetheless. Today, at 60 years old, I look back and see my life in 3 parts. Before that day in the hotel room, during those terrible months of investigation and trial, and after, the rebuilding. The Justice for Her Foundation has helped more than 50 families get proper investigations into suspicious deaths. 3 cases resulted in arrests. 20 families finally got to bury their loved ones knowing the truth. I wrote a book about my experience. The money all went to the foundation. I give talks on red flags in relationships, on how predators choose their victims, on the importance of trusting your instincts. And yes, eventually, I learned to trust again. I met good people, formed new friendships, even went on a few casual dates. Nothing serious. Maybe it never will be again. And that's okay, because I learned that I don't need another person to complete me. I am complete alone, strong alone, alive, very alive, alone. Sometimes at night, I still think about that moment in the closet, the voices of Julian and Brandon planning my death, and I give thanks. I give thanks for deciding to make that silly surprise. I give thanks for hearing the truth, as painful as it was, because the truth saved me, the truth set me free, and the truth gave me the chance to start over. At 60 years old, I am starting over, and this time, I am doing it right. Now, if you like this story, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't post here. I'll see you there. We often think of monsters as creatures hiding in the dark, but sometimes they are the ones holding our hand in the light. This story, while fictionalized, is a mirror to the quiet tragedies happening behind closed doors every day. It reminds us that dignity means knowing when to walk away, and that survival sometimes requires the heartbreaking choice to choose yourself over the people you love. The scars we carry aren't signs of damage. They are proof that we faced the worst and didn't let it destroy us. Peace is possible, but it starts with the truth.